Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This happened a few years ago, but man, do I laugh every time I think of it. When I was a kid, I had a little playhouse that I loved and wanted to pass it down to my kids when I outgrew it. Unfortunately, due to severe storms, it was too damaged to let future kids play in it. But not wanting to part with it, I decided to use a shell as a greenhouse and created a garden within it using roses. I'm really big into upcycling. Over the years, the roses grew in and around it, making it look like a cute, overgrown witch's cottage in my backyard with big, beautiful red English roses in full bloom. Now for context. I live in a house with a small apartment complex to one side that has balconies that overlook into my backyard. I assume this entitled neighbor must have been a tenant that lived on the second floor of the apartment and saw my playhouse, because I got a knock on my door.
Hi, I saw your roses are in bloom, and they are so beautiful.
I'm very proud of my creations, so naturally I thanked him, answered a few questions about how I took care of them, thinking he may want to grow some himself, but he just stood there smiling. Is there anything else you'd like to know?
Well, I was hoping I could have some to make a bouquet for my wife.
Oh, no, sorry. I worked hard on them. I don't feel comfortable cutting them unless I'm pruning for basic upkeep. He seemed to understand this, thanked me for my time, and went back to his apartment. I didn't think anything of it after that until later that day when I got home from school. I was a teen in high school when this happened, and I saw him in my backyard haphazardly cutting the heads of my roses. I ran to my yard screaming, "What do you think you're doing? Stop! Those are my roses. Why would you do this?" The entitled neighbor just looked at me like I was crazy.
I told you I wanted some for my wife.
I am carefully picking up what I can without stabbing myself with the thorns. Yes, and I told you no. I am calling the cops. He tells me not to bother and that he will call them himself as he is close friends with most of the department. I take whatever stems I can inside my house, hoping to save them. A few minutes later, a cop car pulls up. He had actually called him himself, only he had told him that I was harassing him and that he had permission to take the roses. Note: because I was a minor, my mother was called by the officer at work to come home. She did not know I had spoken to the entitled neighbor that morning because she had already left for work before I went to school. The following events happened once she got home. The cop sees me crying and asks me for my side of events. I explain the conversation from that morning and how the entitled neighbor did not have permission at all from me while my mother tried to calm me down. Then the entitled neighbor speaks to the cop.
That's because I had permission from her older brother.
My crying stopped immediately and turned to look at my mother. We both bursted into laughter. We couldn't believe that the entitled neighbor said something so moronic. The cop told us to stop being disrespectful and asked what was so funny. My mother, in between laughing fits, says, "Officers, I am so sorry, but I know for a fact that this man did not speak to her older brother." The cop gets confused and asks, "And why is that?" And I answer him, "Because I'm an only child." I still to this day have no idea why this man thought it would be a good idea to tell the cop that he had a permission from an older brother that I never had, or why he thought he could get away with it with my mother standing right there. Needless to say, we pressed charges on the entitled neighbor for trespassing and destruction of property. We didn't have any issues with him after that, and he and his wife moved a few months afterwards. I was able to save my roses too. The playhouse no longer stands as the years of weather wore it down, but I still have my roses. The characters of this story: myself, OP, nerdy dude that loves anime, video games, and pretty much all things geek culture. My dad, 76-year-old, retired and normally quiet and reserved. From now on will be referred to as my dad. My mom, the exact opposite, Loud, happy, and can be furiously protective of her family. Nice wife, she's a jerk's wife. And last and definitely least, the entitled douchebag. I was in the army, got out of the army and decided to travel the world. That's until a certain virus changed that. So I'm currently renting my old room from my parents' house. Anyway, to the story. The day started off pretty normal. Woke up and it was a rest day for training calisthenics. Decided to start off by watching YouTube and lurking in some subreddits. Some time passed when I heard yelling coming from the front house. The room I'm currently staying in is in the back of my house. I hear my mom yell, "OP, someone yelling at dad." So I walked outside to see a bald guy screaming and cursing at my dad. I have no idea what this about. I say to my dad, "Hey dad, what's going on out here?" Before my dad could say a word, the entitled douchebag screams at me,
"Oh yeah? That's the guy in the passenger seat." "I know it is."
So I'm thinking, what the hell are you on about, dude? I asked my dad again what's going on. And my dad said, "This guy is accusing me of throwing plastic bottles out of the car onto his lawn. And I know nothing about it." So I asked that douchebag, "Is this true?" And he yells, "Of course it is, and you were there." He then steps closer in the front yard and towards me and my dad. I walk next to my dad and the douchebag yells,
"Oh, big man coming to get me?"
Me still next to my dad. "What the hell are you on about? You're on private property screaming at the homeowner." And he yells again,
"This bottle came out of your car."
He then proceeds to throw the bottle at us. Well, in our general direction anyway. And he yells again,
"You were there, don't play dumb."
I say, that's funny. I haven't left the house in 2 days. This surprised the douchebag for a second and again, yep, he yells,
"It was you."
He walks closer with fisted hands. I asked to please step back. He said,
"Or what? What are you going to do?"
My mom finally speaks up. "Or we will call the police on you for trespassing." The entitled douchebag takes off his sunglasses and throws him in the car.
"Oh, fight me then. Come on."
I forgot to tell you he followed my dad's car and followed my dad home for supposedly throwing a plastic bottle on his lawn. He lived 2 streets away, but that's beside the point. Anyway, he did not back down.
"So what? And how about I come back and throw my trash on your lawn?"
My mom said, "That's it. I am calling the cops." The douchebag then starts to leave. But before that he says,
"I'm coming back. I know where you live now."
Finally, the nice wife of his said to the douchebag, "Maybe it wasn't them. Come on, let's leave. They are going to call the cops on you."
"It was them. It was."
At this point, the screaming and yelling has drawn the attention of the neighbors. The nice wife tells my dad, my mom, and myself, "I'm very sorry. It might have been the wrong car. I don't know." Side note, the car my dad drives is a white Hyundai, which is a very popular car in my country. There is another one owned by one of our neighbors in the same street. Not saying that it was them either though. The nice wife tells her husband to get to the car or she is leaving him here and he will have to walk home. He finally gives up, or so we thought anyway. He gets in the passenger seat of the pickup truck and stares daggers at us. The nice wife apologizes again, and that suggests he might want to go see a psychiatrist and they leave. So we went inside and my mom said I should tell our neighbors and family friends. They suggest we make a report to the police and I think so too, because this douchebag threatens physical violence against my dad and I. So we go down to the police station and make a statement and we tell the great policewoman that was on duty exactly what happened. We also found where they lived only because we had driven past it to go to the police station. The policewoman got a hold of them, spoke to the nice wife and she apologized again for following my dad home and making a scene. But the entitled douchebag had already made a statement to the police saying he was defending his home and they shouldn't let her. And he even threatens physical violence towards us again, to which my dad asks to press charges, saying that this man won't give up his dangerous threats against our family. To be continued if anything else comes up. Background: I moved into this house when I was about 5 years old, and the neighbors are super nice for about a year. And then I had a dog which my dad had before I was born, so I grew up with her and she passed away about a year after we moved in. That's when all of the drama started. I was about 8 or 9 and I'm 17 now. So it was 10 or so years ago, so some of the details are a little foggy, but on to the story. About a year after my first dog passed, we got another one. Now to clarify, the first dog did not bark too much and was relatively laid back. But the new dog, who was a rescue, was very protective over her territory, so when she would see a person walking past our house or hear a really loud car, she would start barking. My whole family knew that this was just her protecting her people, but we tried to get her to stop as quickly as possible. She was in our yard with a tall chain link fence, and we didn't know what had happened to her before we rescued her, so we tried to train her out of barking, but she was very protective. Well, one night we left to go to dinner with my grandmother, and when we got back, we saw a cop car, which isn't unusual since we lived near a fire station. We then noticed a cop at the neighbor's house, and the second we all got out of the car, the wife of the couple went pointing at us screaming, which scared us seeing as she had done this before. She started saying they would take our dog away if she kept barking. At this point in time, my dad had to travel for work, so he was on one of those trips, so he wasn't with us, which made us more scared. This was a conversation that ensued. The entitled neighbor yells,
"Those are the people that own that house, and their dog has been outside for hours."
My mother says we left about 45 minutes ago to have dinner with my mother-in-law. I didn't realize I left my dog out. OP, go inside and get the dog back in the house. I run inside and get her to come back in and make sure my siblings are doing okay since they are 5 and don't understand that the police aren't going to take her away. I go back outside to tell my mom she's in and I hear this. The nice cop says, "We got a call that your dog was barking constantly, but when I got here she wasn't barking at all. She only barked when I went up to the gate near your backyard." My mom tells him, "Yes, she does that because she's protecting her yard. I apologize for leaving her out that long."
You need to give her a noise complaint ticket and take that dog away finally. I don't see why you had to get rid of that other dog. She was so sweet and quiet.
This broke my heart, seeing as despite it being a little while, my loss of my dog was still fresh. I went running in the house crying. When my siblings saw this, they got scared, but I told them I fell and was hurt, and to just go back to playing. I got my dog to cuddle her, seeing as I thought she was going to have to go with the officer. I didn't hear the rest of the conversation, but this is what my mom told me after. Mom tells her, "That was a horrible thing to say, especially seeing as we didn't get rid of that dog. She got too sick and died, and my kids are still having trouble with that. So it would be really great of you to be considerate and to not scream such things around my daughter."
I'm only speaking the truth. Now, officer, what are you going to do about this obnoxious dog?
"Well, I'm going to talk to the owner and go from there. So you can go inside now, ma'am. Have a good night." Mom tells the officer, "I'm sorry, officer, for being rude to her, but that's just not the right place to talk about that. It's fine, that house has called us so many times on you and your neighbor that we have started to ignore the calls tonight. I was in the area, so they had me come over quickly. Please just try and remember to put your dog in before you leave the house. I doubt the things they are saying are true, but we don't want any problems." I understand completely, and I promise I will remember to. Have a good night. You too. Now go make sure your daughter is alright. He gets in his car and leaves. My mom walked back in the house and came to make sure we were all okay, and then we called my dad and went to bed. My dog was never taken away, seeing as she would have had to attack someone for that, and the neighbors did the same thing for that, and other things until they finally moved about 3 years ago. Good riddance. In 2019, I moved from an apartment complex in Celebration, Florida to a condo, and as usual, when you move out of an apartment, you get a final bill, which includes your last month's prorated rent, deductions for damages, security deposit refunds, and the like. We paid it. The next month I get a call from my wife who says we've got a follow-up bill in the mail from the apartment management company. It was for 2 cents. We're both in the tech field, so we laughed that this company's IT department didn't catch the edge case of spending 50 cents in postage to collect 2 cents in revenue. But it happens. My wife prints out a copy of the bill. I grab 2 cents from the change jar. The apartment complex is on my daily drive, so I swing by the office. I walk in and tell the manager that I want to pay my last bill. I say, it's 2 cents. Here is a bill, and I had the 2 cents if you want it. And the manager says, we don't take cash. Nothing else. There was an awkward pause. I say, I don't expect you to take cash. I expect us both to have a laugh about how silly computer systems are, and for you to write off the 2 cents, because it would cost you more to process a payment. And she says, I'm not going to do that. Again, awkward pause. I say, so you want me to write you a check for 2 cents and mail it? And you're going to process that check? The manager says, yes, send us a check and we will process it. And then walks back into her office to end the conversation. So I go home and set up an automatic monthly bank payment to my apartment complex for 3 cents. And then, because I'm a programmer, I write some code to send a letter once per month, saying I'm so sorry, I've overpaid my bill. Please send me a check for the overpayment. And I use an online service that sends postcards in ridiculous sizes up to around 18 by 24 inches, figuring that'll be my escalation strategy. The first of the next month, I get a call from the apartment company's regional manager. After introducing himself, the next 2 minutes were the most sincere, "Oh God, we made a mistake. Please don't do this. We will never contact you again." Yep, the most sincere apology anyone could have hoped for. I stopped the mail and never heard from them again. Did I spend several hours on malicious compliance for 2 cents? Yes. Was it worth it? Absolutely. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.